Piece out of 1945, buttressing a point that I made just on the 19th of this month. A European army could resolve NATO's biggest weakness. On the 19th, I put this video out. Ukraine war will birth the EU army. It's 12 minutes, and this was dropped on the 19th. Ukraine war will birth the EU army. And that's because of an article that I had seen out of The Guardian that Zelenskyy calls for European army as Germany hits back at U.S. over tirade as it happened. And this is a blow-by-blow account of a few meetings in Europe. We're going to go through just a couple of points on that. However, a European army is something that I've said is virtually inevitable. And that's because Article 5 does not necessarily commit the United States to come to Europe's defense. Rather, the article conditions the response with the phrase, such action as any member deems necessary. NATO is a consensus-governed organization, so the United States could block any response. Second, even if Washington chose not to block NATO action, there is little NATO could do if the United States simply walked away from a crisis. Put another way, would Donald Trump really risk nuclear war if Russian forces moved into Estonia? Now, I don't think the president would back down from treaty commitments like that. However, when you're talking about a group like NATO, who, again, is a consensus-building organization, but if we walked away, they would be nothing. They would have no capabilities whatsoever to defend their own continent. And this article goes into that very thing. The idea of a European army overlapping with NATO is not new. 7 years ago, Europe marked the century of the World War I armistice. French President Emmanuel Macron, upset with Trump's decision to pull out of the 1987 intermediate-range nuclear forces with Russia, floated the idea that a European army might need a true European army. Floated the idea that the European Union might need a true European army. We might have a Europe that can defend itself on its own without relying only on the United States. At the time, policymakers treated Macron's approach more of a representative of growing frustration with Trump than a serious proposal. Today, however, European officials are serious. Could a European army replace NATO? And if so, could that be a good thing? Would it replace NATO or work alongside NATO? That's tough. That's tough to say. Because just creating a European army is fraught with all kinds of issues. The notion that Montenegro or Slovenia should have equal say in security policy as the United States sits poorly in Washington. Second, the Turkish problem looms large. When Turkey entered NATO, it was a country that aspired to be more European outlook. Today, it is anti-Western and a terror sponsor. Turkey has openly blackmailed NATO over Sweden's inclusion and questions borders and the exclusive economic zone with NATO member Greece and European member Cyprus. If Europe were willing to invest in and build a European army, it could solve both problems. Gone should be consensus. The Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe embraces a consensus -1 policy to prevent any single state from filibustering operations. This could be a good model for a European army. Likewise, a European army could exclude Turkey, disempowering the Turkish despot with the stroke of a pen. While European elites might fret the problem with Erdogan and Turkey, this is wrong. Over his 2 decades in control, Erdogan has indoctrinated more than 30 million Turks through curricula changes in Turkey's education system and completely overhauled the military. It's also my opinion that we should remove our nuclear weapons from Incirlik Air Force Base in Turkey. It would be too easy for some rowdy members of a Turkish proxy group to be allowed to circumvent security in some way. Perhaps Turkey went rogue and physically stopped our removal. We should be removing those. What then would be the downside of a European army replacing NATO? Here the problem would be North America. The United States relies on Europe and indeed Turkey for some early warning missile launch detection. Armenia, however, could replace Turkey's contribution, as could separate bilateral deals with countries like Cyprus and Poland. And this brings us to the Zelenskyy quote. Zelenskyy calls for European army as Germany hits back at U.S. over tirade as it happened. The Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, told the Munich Security Conference on Saturday that the time has come for a European army to be created. Our army alone is not enough. We need your support, he said, adding that the old days when the U.S. supported Europe, just because it always had, are over. He also told leaders and officials that he would not take NATO membership for Ukraine off the table and insisted that no decisions have been taken on ending Russia's war without Ukraine and Europe. Well, both of you are kind of been put to the side. And if we stop supporting you, it's over. And he knows it. And the reason he's bringing up a European army is because he knows he's not going to get into NATO. The United States is not going to allow that. However, he would have the chance to get into a European army, which, if you're Russia, I don't know quite how you take that. We'll cross that bridge when we do. However, that might be the only security guarantee that he can get. Now, whether he'd be allowed in there or not will be determined by the end of this war. But I do think it's become obvious, and my point is just merely buttressed by this article, that I think the Ukraine war will birth the European army. I think it's inevitable. I think this is absolutely on course now. You have enough European leaders demanding it. I think it's inevitable. I'll be sure to link these articles so everybody can take a look at them, but European army looks like it might be a real thing on the way. What would that do with NATO? Would they work side by side? Would Europe leave NATO? We'll cross that bridge when we cross it. That said, it does appear to me that we will soon have the creation of a European army, the EU army. We'll see how the world responds. But I just wanted to bring this to you, kind of buttressing my point that I made on the 19th. I hope you liked it. If you did, please hit the like. Get a subscribe and maybe share it with a friend. I appreciate you, and I thank you.